The first thing that hit Liam when he walked through the door was the silence. Not the peaceful, late afternoon quiet he was used to, but a deep, hollow silence that seemed to absorb all sound. The air was still and cold, carrying the faint, sterile scent of lemon cleaner instead of the warm aroma of Chloe's baking or the earthy fragrance of her oil paints. He dropped his briefcase by the door, the soft thud echoing unnervingly in the foyer. A knot of unease tightened in his stomach. "Chloe?" he called out, his voice sounding small and foreign in his own home. "I'm home, honey." No reply. He walked through the archway into the living room. Everything was pristine, disturbingly so. The throw pillows on the sofa were perfectly fluffed, the stack of art history books on the coffee table squared away. This was not the happy, lived-in chaos of their life. It was the sterile order of a house preparing for a showing. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart starting to hammer against his ribs. "Chloe," he called again, louder this time, a tremor of fear lacing his voice. Their bedroom was empty, the bed made with military precision. A wave of dizziness washed over him. He leaned against the doorframe, scanning the room. That's when he saw it. Propped against the pillows, in the exact center of their king-sized bed, was a single, folded piece of cream-colored stationery. Chloe's favorite kind. With trembling hands, he walked over and picked it up. Her name wasn't on it, nor was his. It was simply there, waiting. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the elegant, looping script. "My dearest Liam, I'm so sorry to do this. I know the timing is terrible, with the baby coming, but I can't pretend anymore. This life, this house, it isn't me. I feel like I'm suffocating, playing a part that was never written for me. I need to find myself again, the woman I was before all of this. I need space to breathe, to paint, to just be. Don't try to find me. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Please try to understand. I'll always love you in my own way. Chloe." The paper fluttered from his numb fingers. Suffocating? This life they had built, the one he worked 60-hour weeks to maintain, the home they had lovingly renovated in anticipation of their daughter's arrival, was a cage? The words blurred through a sudden film of tears. He stumbled back, his legs hitting the edge of an armchair, and sank into it. He looked around the room, at the half-finished mural of a moon and stars on the nursery wall, visible through the open door, at the sonogram picture taped to her vanity mirror, at the sheer emptiness of it all. 7 months pregnant. His wife was 7 months pregnant, and she had just walked away. The silence of the house was no longer hollow. It was screaming with betrayal, a sound only he could hear. The note was her voice, her words, her final, devastating judgment on their marriage. He buried his face in his hands, the carefully constructed world he called his own shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The police were polite, but unhelpful. Detective Miller, a man with tired eyes and a weary smile, read the note twice. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "your wife is an adult. She's pregnant, yes, and that's a concern. But she left a note. It's written in her hand, on her stationery. It explicitly says not to look for her. From where we stand, there's no evidence of foul play. She just left." Liam felt a surge of frustrated anger. "She's 7 months pregnant. She has no family in this state besides her sister. Where would she go? She wouldn't just leave everything behind. The baby's room, her studio. People do things we don't expect, especially under stress," Miller countered, handing the note back. "Hormones, anxiety about motherhood, maybe some marital issues you weren't aware of. We'll file a report, of course. If she doesn't use her credit cards or contact anyone within 72 hours, we can reevaluate. For now, my advice is to give her the space she asked for. Space. The word felt like a slap. He wanted to scream that his unborn child didn't have space to be born on the street, but he just nodded, feeling the door to official help closing in his face. The next calls were even harder. First to his own parents, whose shocked grief quickly morphed into a barrage of frantic, unanswerable questions. Then to Chloe's sister, Maya. Maya answered on the second ring, her voice tight with alarm. "Liam, what's wrong? I've been trying to call Chloe all afternoon." He choked on the words. "She's gone, Maya." A sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Gone? What do you mean, gone? Like, to the store?" "No, she left. She packed a bag and left a note." He read the note to her, his voice breaking on the final line. There was a long, terrible silence on the line, punctuated only by a shaky sob. "Oh, Liam. Oh, God, no." Maya's voice was a whisper of pure devastation. I knew she was feeling overwhelmed. But I never thought. She said she was feeling a little trapped, that the mural wasn't coming out right. But I just thought it was pregnancy jitters. Her words were like small, sharp stones pelting his already bruised heart. She'd confided in Maya, but not in him. "She told you she felt trapped?" "Not in those exact words," Maya said quickly, as if backtracking. "More like anxious, worried she was losing her identity, you know, becoming just a mum. I told her it was normal. I told her you loved her." More sobbing. "I should have paid more attention. I should have called you." No, it's not your fault," Liam said, the words automatic. He felt a strange need to comfort her, the only other person who might understand the depth of this loss. In the days that followed, Maya became his rock. She came over with casseroles he couldn't eat, helped him field calls from concerned friends, and sat with him in the suffocatingly quiet house. She was a whirlwind of practical grief, her face a mask of worried sorrow. I checked her favorite retreats, the art colonies she used to go to upstate, Maya reported one evening, her brow furrowed with concern as she scrolled through her phone. Nothing. It's like she vanished into thin air. I hate this, Liam. I hate thinking of her out there alone, and pregnant. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Have you thought about what she wrote?" "About?" "Feeling suffocated." Liam flinched. "I thought we were happy." Maya reached across the table and placed a hand on his. It was cool and steady. "You were. But Liam, you work so much. You're a wonderful provider. But you're gone before she wakes up and home, after she's already exhausted. Maybe she just felt lonely, like she was going through this huge life change all by herself." The accusation, gentle as it was, landed with the force of a punch. It was true. He had been pushing for a promotion, staying late, taking on extra projects to ensure they'd have a massive cushion when the baby arrived. He'd seen it as an act of love, of provision. Had she seen it as abandonment? Maya's words, born of sisterly concern, planted a seed of guilt that began to sprout, its thorny vines wrapping around his heart. He was the reason she'd left. He had driven his pregnant wife away through his ambition and neglect. The narrative was solidifying, and Maya, his caring, supportive sister-in-law, was the one cementing its foundation. He was the villain of this story. A week bled into 2. The initial frantic panic subsided, leaving a dull, chronic ache in its place. Liam moved through his days like a ghost in his own life, the silence of the house a constant, oppressive companion. He'd walk into the nursery and stare at the half-painted moon, his hand resting on the smooth wood of the empty crib. He was sleeping on the sofa, unable to bear the vast, empty space in their bed where Chloe should be. He found himself rereading the note, sometimes 10 or 20 times a day. He'd trace the letters with his finger, trying to feel her presence in the ink. But the more he read it, the more a strange dissonance began to hum beneath the surface of his grief. "I'll always love you in my own way." Chloe was passionate, direct. She wasn't one for qualifiers. She'd say, "I love you," or she wouldn't. The phrase felt constructed. It was the kind of thing one writes in a high school yearbook, not a goodbye letter to a husband. This life, this house, it isn't me. She had picked out this house. She had spent a year joyfully choosing paint colors, fabrics, and furniture. She loved their home. She called it their nest. Why would she suddenly describe it as a prison? These were small things, tiny threads sticking out from an otherwise smooth fabric of betrayal. He tried to dismiss them as the ramblings of a desperate mind trying to find an alternate reality. Maya was right. He had neglected her. His guilt was a powerful filter, coloring everything he saw. One rainy Tuesday, while aimlessly scrolling through his phone, he came across a photo from a few months ago. It was a selfie Chloe had taken in their yard. She was beaming, her hand cupping her small but growing baby bump. In the background, Maya was smiling over her shoulder, her arm wrapped around Chloe. He remembered that day. They had spent the afternoon planting a garden. He'd been on a conference call for most of it, watching them from his office window, feeling a pang of regret that he couldn't join them. He zoomed in on the photo. On Maya. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. There was something tight around her mouth, a flicker of an expression he couldn't name. He scrolled back further, through months of photos. Barbecues, birthdays, holidays. And in every picture, when she looked at Chloe, at their life, he saw it again. That faint, almost imperceptible shadow of... what? Resentment? Envy? He shook his head, disgusted with himself. Maya had been nothing but a saint. She was grieving for her sister, supporting him, holding him together. And here he was, manufacturing conspiracies out of a photograph, but the thread had been pulled. Later that week, he was cleaning out the fridge, throwing away the casseroles he'd never touched, when he found a container of Chloe's favorite lemon rosemary chicken. His throat tightened. He remembered the last time she'd made it, just 2 days before she disappeared. They'd eaten dinner on the patio. She had seemed happy, excited. She spent 20 minutes describing how she wanted to teach their daughter how to paint, how she couldn't wait to see the world through a child's eyes. These were not the words of a woman planning to flee. He sat down at the kitchen island, his mind racing, trying to stitch together the days before she left. Chloe had been a little quiet, yes, but she'd blamed it on being tired. Maya had come over the day Chloe disappeared. She'd said she was bringing some maternity clothes she'd found on sale. Liam had been at the office. He'd come home to the empty house just a few hours later. He remembered Maya's words on the phone. "I've been trying to call Chloe all afternoon. Why? If she had just seen her, why would she be calling her all afternoon?" It was a small inconsistency, but added to the others it felt like a snag. The wording of the note, the look in Maya's eyes, the happy dinner. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff in a thick fog, sensing a deep chasm before him, but unable to see it clearly. His grief was slowly, terrifyingly, beginning to curdle into suspicion. The box had been sitting in the corner of the nursery for a month, a painful monument to a future that had been stolen. It contained the high-tech baby monitor Liam had insisted on buying. It was one of the fancy ones with a crystal-clear HD camera, two-way audio, and a cloud-based recording feature. Overkill, Chloe had teased him. It's a baby, not a bank vault. He had decided to finally clean out the nursery. It was a form of self-flagellation, a way to confront the pain head-on. As he broke down the crib, his hands shaking, he saw the box. On a whim born of pure, gut-wrenching nostalgia, he took the camera out. He remembered plugging it in the day it arrived, just to test the connection to his phone. He'd placed it on top of the bookshelf, aimed at the crib, and then promptly forgot about it, caught up in another project. It had been plugged in for weeks before Chloe vanished. A cold dread, sharp and electric, prickled down his spine. He sank to the floor, pulling out his phone. His fingers felt thick and clumsy as he navigated to the app for the camera. He'd forgotten the password, fumbling with it twice before it finally logged him in. The app opened to a live view of the empty, half-dismantled nursery. He navigated to the event history. His heart was a frantic drum against his ribs. He scrolled back, past weeks of empty recordings triggered by dust motes floating in sunbeams. He went to the date. The day Chloe disappeared. He found a clip from that afternoon, labeled Motion Detected. 2:17 p.m. He tapped it. The video loaded. The frame was filled with the nursery, the mural, the bookshelf, the rocking chair. The lighting was soft, autumnal. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, a figure entered the frame from the left. It was Maya. She was holding a piece of cream-colored stationery and a pen. Liam's breath caught in his throat. She walked to the center of the room, her back partially to the camera. She seemed to be looking for something. She glanced around, then walked over to the dresser, where Chloe kept her art supplies and a box of her personal stationery. Maya paused, then walked back toward the center of the frame, but she didn't have the single sheet anymore. She had the whole box. She sat in the rocking chair, the one Chloe had spent a weekend refinishing. She placed the box of stationery on her lap, and then, with slow, deliberate movements, she began to write. Liam zoomed in, his hand trembling so violently he could barely hold the phone. He could see her brow furrowed in concentration, her tongue poking out from the corner of her mouth, just as it did when she was a child. She was mimicking something. He watched as she painstakingly formed each letter, her hand moving with an unnatural slowness. She was copying Chloe's handwriting. After a few minutes, she held up the paper, comparing it to another sheet she pulled from her pocket. Likely an old birthday card or letter from Chloe. A small, tight smile of satisfaction crossed her face. She carefully folded the note she had just written and placed the one she used for copying back in her pocket. Then she stood up, walked out of the nursery, and out of the frame. The video ended. Liam dropped his phone. It clattered to the hardwood floor, but he didn't hear it. The sound roaring in his ears was the sound of his entire reality, collapsing for a second time. It wasn't Chloe's betrayal. It was Maya's, the casseroles, the comforting words, the gentle accusations aimed at him. It was all a lie. A calculated, monstrous performance. She had sat in this very house, feigning grief while knowing everything. She had not only orchestrated Chloe's disappearance, she had authored it. She had written the words that had shattered his heart. He scrambled for the phone, his mind a maelstrom of rage and terror. He didn't know where Chloe was or if she was safe, but he now knew who was responsible. And he was looking at her face, recorded for all time by a silent, plastic witness on a bookshelf. The 20-minute drive to Maya's suburban townhome felt like an eternity. Liam's hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that his knuckles were white. The video played on a loop in his mind. Maya's furrowed concentration, a small smile of triumph. Every comforting word she had spoken to him in the past 2 weeks now felt like a shard of glass in his gut. The rage was a physical thing, a hot, coiling serpent in his chest, so potent it almost choked him. He didn't bother knocking. He used the spare key Maya had given him in case of emergencies and burst through the door. She was in the kitchen, humming along to the radio as she chopped vegetables. She looked up, a bright, welcoming smile on her face. "Liam!" "What a surprise. I was just making some soup. I can pack some up for you." "Where is she?" he snarled. The sound that came out of him was guttural, animalistic. It was a voice he didn't recognize as his own. Maya's smile faltered. She placed the knife down slowly, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "Where is who?" "Honey, what are you talking about? Are you okay?" "Don't you honey me," he spat, advancing on her. "Don't you dare. Where is Chloe?" "Liam, you're scaring me," she said, her voice taking on a wounded, trembling quality. "I don't know where she is. We've been over this." "I wish I did, more than anything." "Stop lying," he roared, slamming his hand down on the butcher block counter. The vegetables jumped. Maya flinched, a flicker of genuine fear finally crossing her face. "I know you wrote the note, Maya. I have proof." For a split second, her mask of concern slipped. He saw it, a flash of pure, cold panic, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by practiced indignation. "Proof? What are you talking about? You're grieving, Liam. You're not thinking straight. How could you accuse me of something so horrible?" He pulled out his phone, his hand still shaking with adrenaline. He didn't say another word. He just hit play and turned the screen toward her. The color drained from her face as she watched herself in the nursery, meticulously forging the note that had destroyed his world. The humming from the radio suddenly seemed obscenely cheerful. The phone's tinny audio was the only sound in the room as Maya's on-screen doppelganger completed her work. When the video ended, she stared at the black screen, her mouth slightly agape. "The baby monitor," she whispered, her voice raspy with disbelief. "You set up the baby monitor." "Where is she?" Liam repeated, his voice dangerously low. "Where did you send her? Is she safe?" The facade crumbled completely. The supportive sister-in-law vanished, replaced by a woman contorted by a lifetime of resentment. Her face hardened, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure venom. "Safe? Of course she's safe. She's probably safer than she ever was with you. What did you do?" "I helped her!" Maya shrieked, her voice rising hysterically. "I did what she was too weak to do for herself. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch her just float through life? Everything was always handed to Chloe. The talent, the looks, the rich, successful husband who would give her anything she wanted. While I worked my fingers to the bone at a dead-end job, dealing with my deadbeat ex and his debts, she was planning a nursery in her perfect house." Her words tumbled out, a torrent of jealousy held back for decades. "She was complaining to me, you know. Complaining. Oh, Liam's working so much. Oh, I'm so tired, I don't feel creative." She had everything, and she didn't even appreciate it. She was suffocating. I'm the one who has been suffocating. Liam stared at her, horrified. This was not about concern for Chloe. This was a coup. You manipulated her. You told her lies about me. "I told her the truth," Maya shot back, "that you were a neglectful workaholic who cared more about his blueprints than his pregnant wife. I told her she needed to get away, to a place where she could clear her head before the baby came. A special retreat for expecting mothers. No phones, no internet. A place to disconnect from all the stresses in her life. Like you, a retreat. No phones." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Maya had isolated her. "Where is it, Maya?" he demanded, stepping closer. "Give me the name. Give me the address." "Now," she looked at him, a sneer twisting her lips. For a moment, he thought she would refuse. But seeing the raw fury in his eyes, the absolute resolve that he would tear her house apart piece by piece if he had to, her defiance finally broke. She scribbled an address on a notepad and shoved it at him. The Whispering Pines Wellness Sanctuary. In the Berkshires, she said, her voice dripping with scorn. Go play the hero. But don't think for a second this changes anything. You still failed her. I just gave her the push she needed. He snatched the paper from her hand and turned without another word, leaving her alone in her silent kitchen, the mask of her betrayal finally, irrevocably, cast aside. The drive to the Berkshires was a frantic, 3-hour blur of winding roads and the darkening green of the New England landscape. Liam's mind was a frantic cacophony of fear and hope. Was Chloe okay? Did she believe Maya's lies? Would she even want to see him? The questions were a torment, each one a fresh stab of anxiety. The Whispering Pines Wellness Sanctuary was less a sanctuary and more a high-end prison. A sprawling modern lodge set deep in the woods, it had an air of forced tranquility. He parked in the guest lot and ran to the main entrance, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. A serene-looking woman at the front desk greeted him with a placid smile. "Welcome to Whispering Pines. How may we help you find your peace today?" "I'm looking for my wife," Liam said, breathless. "Chloe Hayes. She's a guest here." The woman's smile didn't waver. "I'm sorry, sir, but to maintain our guest's privacy and digital detox, we cannot confirm who is staying with us. All communication must be initiated by the guest upon their departure." "This is an emergency," Liam insisted, his voice rising. "Her sister sent her here under false pretenses. She's 7 months pregnant, and she needs to come home with me." "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice," the woman said, her calm demeanor beginning to crack. "Our guests come here to escape stressful situations." "I'm her husband! She's my wife!" he yelled, slamming his hands on the polished birchwood desk. He was losing control, but he didn't care. The thought of Chloe being just a few 100 feet away, trapped by protocol and lies, was unbearable. Suddenly a soft voice from behind him said, "Liam." He spun around. There, standing at the bottom of a grand staircase, was Chloe. She was wearing a simple white linen dress provided by the retreat. Her hair was tied back, and her face was pale. Her eyes, wide and questioning, were fixed on him. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly. Relief, so powerful it almost buckled his knees, washed over him. "Chloe," he breathed, moving toward her. But she took a step back, her hand held up to stop him. The hurt and confusion in her eyes were a physical blow. "What are you doing here?" Maya said. "She said you needed space, that you felt trapped by the baby coming." The world tilted on its axis. Maya hadn't just lied to him. She had created a perfect, poisonous mirror image of the lie. She had used Chloe's own anxieties and insecurities and turned them back on her, painting Liam as the one who wanted to escape. "No, Chloe, no," he said, his voice cracking. He stopped where he was, not wanting to scare her. "That's not true. None of it is true. Maya lied to you. She lied to both of us." Chloe's brow furrowed. "Lied?" "Liam, she showed me text messages, from you to her. You said you weren't ready for this, that you were thinking of leaving. Forged texts. Of course. Maya had been planning this for months. They weren't real, honey. She made them up. Just like she made this up." He pulled the folded note from his pocket, the one he'd carried with him for 2 weeks, and held it out to her. "She wrote this. She pretended it was from you." Chloe stared at the note, then back at his face. Her expression was a painful mix of disbelief and dawning horror. "Wrote it? But that's my stationery, my handwriting." "She forged it, Chloe. She practiced. I have a video of her doing it." He took a tentative step closer. "I came home, and you were gone. This note was on our bed. I thought you'd left me. I thought you didn't want me, or our baby. For 2 weeks I've been living in hell, thinking I drove you away." Tears began to stream down Chloe's face as the enormity of her sister's betrayal began to sink in. She looked from the note in his hand to the raw, desperate pain on his face. She saw the truth there. She saw the man she loved, shattered and terrified, not the cold, distant husband Maya had described. "She told me you wanted me to come here," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. "She said it was your idea, a way for me to have a gentle separation before you ended things for good. She said you thought I was unstable." He closed the distance between them, finally, and wrapped his arms around her. She stiffened for a moment, then collapsed against him, her body shaking with violent sobs. He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair, inhaling the familiar scent of her. She was real. She was here. She was safe. She lied, he whispered into her ear, over and over again, like a prayer. "It was all a lie. I never wanted you to leave. I want you. I want our daughter. I want our life back." They stood there in the silent, sterile lobby of the Whispering Pines, two people caught in the wreckage of a devastating deception, holding on to each other as the truth, ugly and liberating, finally came to light. The reunion was not one of simple joy, but of shared trauma and profound, aching relief. They had found each other, but the path back home was going to be longer and harder than either of them could imagine. The drive home was heavy with a silence that was vastly different from the one that had haunted Liam for weeks. It wasn't an empty silence. It was dense, filled with unspoken questions, pain, and the fragile, terrifying task of rebuilding. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the passing trees, her hand never leaving her stomach. When they walked back into their house, she stopped in the foyer and looked around as if seeing it for the first time. It was the same space she had left, but the emotional landscape had been irrevocably altered. Liam saw it through her eyes. The place where the lie began. The stage for her husband's imagined betrayal. "I'm so sorry, Chloe," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry I wasn't paying enough attention, that I let my work consume me. I gave Maya the space to do this. I made you feel alone." Chloe finally looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "And I'm sorry I believed her," she said softly. "There was a part of me that knew it didn't sound like you, but I was so scared. I felt so big and clumsy and lost, and she knew exactly what to say. She used all my deepest fears against me, against us." That night, they didn't sleep. They sat at the kitchen table and talked for hours, the first truly honest conversation they'd had in a year. The carefully constructed walls they had built around their individual anxieties came tumbling down. Liam confessed the intense pressure he felt to be the perfect provider, a pressure that stemmed from his own father's financial failures. He admitted that he'd buried himself in work as a way to control his fear of not being good enough for her and their coming child. He had been so focused on building the scaffolding of their life that he had forgotten to live inside it with her. The power imbalance wasn't one of malice, but of neglect. He held the financial power, and in his obsessive focus on it, he had rendered her emotionally powerless. Chloe, in turn, shared the profound identity crisis that had been brewing within her. She confessed her terror of her art being subsumed by motherhood, of her name changing from Chloe the artist to simply Mom. She admitted that his long hours had made her feel like a secondary character in her own life, a ghost haunting the beautiful home he provided. Her vulnerability had been a fertile ground for Maya's poison. They talked about Maya. Chloe cried, not with the sharp grief of loss, but with the hollow ache of a deep, primal bond being severed. She was my big sister, she whispered, wiping away tears. She was supposed to be the one person in the world, besides you, who would protect me. How could she hate me that much? Hate us? Liam had no answers. He could only hold her hand and listen, feeling the shards of their broken trust beginning to knit back together. Not seamlessly, but into something new, a mosaic bonded by shared pain and a brutal, clarifying honesty. The next morning, Chloe walked into the nursery and stared at the unfinished mural. Liam stood in the doorway, watching her. She traced the outline of the pale, half-painted moon. "I couldn't finish it," she said, her back to him. Maya told me it looked amateurish, that pregnancy had probably dulled my talent. Liam's jaw tightened. The cruelty was bottomless. Chloe turned to face him, a flicker of her old fire in her eyes. "I'm going to finish it," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And then I'm going to call her." Liam started to protest, to say he would handle it, but he stopped himself. This was her betrayal to confront, her power to reclaim. All he could do was stand by her. Later that day, she made the call. Liam sat beside her on the sofa, holding her hand as she put the phone on speaker. Maya answered, her voice syrupy sweet. "Chloe? Oh my God, is that you? Where are you? Are you okay? Liam has been going out of his mind." "I'm home, Maya," Chloe said, her voice steady and cold. "I'm home with my husband." There was a pause. Oh, good. I'm so glad he found you. I was so worried." "Stop it," Chloe said, her voice cutting through the facade. "Just stop. We know what you did. We know you wrote the note. We know you lied to me, and you lied to him. I have one question for you, Maya." "Why?" The silence on the other end stretched for an eternity. When Maya finally spoke, her voice was stripped of all pretense, leaving only the raw, ugly core of her resentment. "Because you didn't deserve it," she hissed. "None of it. And I wanted you to know what it felt like to be alone. To be left with nothing." Chloe closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her cheek. She didn't scream or cry. She simply said, "Goodbye, Maya," and ended the call. She then blocked the number. It wasn't a dramatic showdown, but a quiet, decisive amputation, the severing of a gangrenous limb to save the whole. It was an ending, and a painful, necessary beginning. The weeks that followed were a study in quiet reclamation. The house, once a crime scene of emotional trauma, slowly began to feel like a home again. The work was not easy. It was a conscious, daily effort. For Liam, it meant fundamentally rewiring the habits of a lifetime. He delegated major projects at work, shocking his partners by leaving the office at 5 o'clock sharp every day. He started turning his phone off when he got home, trading spreadsheets for conversations. He learned the art of being present. He would sit in Chloe's studio, not talking, just watching her paint, breathing in the scent of turpentine and linseed oil. He learned that his presence was more valuable than any paycheck. He massaged her swollen feet, cooked her dinner, and read to her belly at night, his voice a low rumble against her skin. He wasn't just being a good husband. He was actively falling in love with his wife all over again, discovering the strong, resilient woman who had weathered a storm he had helped create. This was his redemption, not in a grand gesture, but in 1,000 small, consistent acts of attention and love. For Chloe, healing came with a brush in her hand. She returned to the nursery mural with a vengeance. The pale, hesitant moon she had abandoned was now transformed. She filled it with deep, vibrant craters of silver and gold. The stars around it were not gentle twinkles, but explosive, dynamic bursts of light. It was a cosmos filled with strength and resilience. Her art, which she feared losing, became the very tool of her salvation. It was how she processed the betrayal, the fear and the anger. They went to therapy together. In the neutral space of a therapist's office, they learned a new language for their fears and needs. They confronted the uncomfortable truth that Maya's attack had only been successful because there were already cracks in their foundation. They had been functioning as two separate entities under one roof, both lonely in their own way. The crisis had shattered that dynamic, forcing them to rebuild as a true partnership. One Saturday afternoon, as Chloe put the finishing touches on the mural, Liam came in with 2 cups of tea. He stood beside her, looking at the finished wall. It was magnificent. The moon seemed to glow with an inner light, and the stars pulsed with energy. In the corner, nestled among a swirl of nebulae, she had painted a tiny, perfect rendering of their house. "It's the most beautiful thing you've ever painted," he said, his voice thick with awe. "It's about resilience," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "It's about how the universe is made of chaos and explosions, but it still creates things of beauty. It holds itself together." He wrapped his arm around her, his hand resting on top of hers on her belly. Their daughter kicked, a strong, definitive thump against their palms. They both laughed, a genuine, easy sound that had been absent for too long. "She likes it," Liam whispered. "She'd better," Chloe smiled. "It's her view." There was no formal resolution with Maya. A lawyer sent a cease and desist letter, and she faded from their lives, a toxic ghost in their shared history. Forgiveness was a continent Chloe was not yet ready to explore, and Liam felt no need to push her. Their focus was forward, on the 3 of them. The redemptive arc wasn't about forgiving the betrayer. It was about the 2 of them healing the wounds within their own marriage, and in doing so, saving each other. They had earned this peace, brushstroke by brushstroke, conversation by conversation. They were not the same people they were a few months ago. They were stronger, more honest, and more deeply connected than ever before. Amelia Hayes was born on a crisp October morning, just as the sun was beginning to cast a golden glow over the city. She arrived with a full head of dark hair, Chloe's deep blue eyes, and a cry that was surprisingly robust. Holding her for the first time, Liam felt a love so fierce and absolute it was like the world shifting on its axis. He looked over at Chloe, her face tired but luminous, and saw his entire universe there in that hospital bed. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, fumbling diaper changes, and the overwhelming, constant thrum of love for the tiny person who had taken over their lives. The trauma of the preceding months did not simply vanish. It lingered in the quiet moments. Sometimes, Liam would wake up in a cold sweat, the phantom image of the empty house flashing in his mind. Chloe, too, had moments where a shadow would cross her face, the echo of her sister's cruelty. But the presence of Amelia was a powerful antidote. Her needs were immediate and all-consuming, pulling them relentlessly into the present. Her gurgling laughs were a balm, her tiny hand, gripping his finger, a profound anchor. One evening, about a month after Amelia was born, Liam was rocking her in the nursery. The room was bathed in the soft light of the mural's moon. Chloe came and stood in the doorway, watching them. She was no longer just the woman he loved. She was the mother of his child, a title she wore with a natural grace that defied all her previous fears. "She loves the moon," Chloe whispered. "She just stares at it. She knows good art," Liam murmured, his eyes locked on his daughter's peaceful face. He looked up at Chloe, his heart full. "I never said it enough before, but I'm so proud of you, of the art you make, of the mother you are, of the woman you've always been." Chloe walked over and wrapped her arms around him and the baby, resting her cheek on his shoulder. They stood there for a long time, a small family framed by a universe of painted stars, breathing in the quiet rhythm of their new life. The scars of Maya's betrayal were still there, faint white lines on the fabric of their history, but they were no longer gaping wounds. They were proof of what they had survived. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale anymore, if it ever was. It was a real story, etched with pain, resilience, and a hard-won, beautiful truth. They had faced the absolute worst kind of deception, one that came from within their own family, and they had not only survived it, but had emerged with a bond that was stronger and more authentic than before. Holding his wife and daughter in the room that had once been the scene of a crime, Liam knew this was not a happy ending. It was something far better. It was a hopeful, honest beginning. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. The story of Liam and Chloe is a powerful reminder that sometimes the deepest betrayals come from those we trust the most, and that true redemption is found not in grand gestures, but in the quiet, daily work of showing up for the ones you love. It shows us that even when trust is shattered, a foundation can be rebuilt, stronger and more honest than before. If their story of resilience, love, and the fight for truth touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who appreciates a story with real depth. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more powerful dramas that explore the complex realities of life and love. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What part of their story resonated with you the most?
The morning light poured gently through the tall glass windows of the Cole mansion, touching everything except Elena's heart. The air felt cold, too still for a home that once echoed with laughter. 8 months pregnant, Elena Moore sat at the edge of the bed, her hands resting protectively on her belly, whispering a soft prayer that her husband, Damon, might come home before the day ended. The mansion was magnificent, but to her, it had become a museum of memories, framed smiles and hollow promises. Damon, the billionaire who once knelt beneath fairy lights to promise her a forever, now disappeared for days. His phone always on silent, his excuses always polished. Business meetings, he'd say. But the scent that clung to his suits wasn't business. It was betrayal, wrapped in expensive perfume. Still, Elena tried to be perfect, to smile when servants greeted her, to host charity calls, to send Damon goodnight texts he no longer answered. Each message was a small act of hope, a desperate reminder to herself that love could still return. When her father, Charles Moore, the formidable CEO whose empire stretched across continents, visited that afternoon, he saw through her smile. He saw the slight tremor in her hands, the pain behind her calm voice, yet he said nothing. He respected her marriage, even if it broke him to watch his daughter fade like a flower left in the dark. That night, as thunder rolled beyond the mansion walls, Elena sat by the window, tracing raindrops with her finger. "He'll come back," she whispered to her unborn child, her voice trembling. But deep inside, a quiet truth began to whisper louder than her hope. The perfect picture was already cracking. Vanessa Hart entered Damon's life like a spark in dry grass, dangerous, dazzling, and impossible to contain. She was everything he once claimed to despise, manipulative, unapologetically ambitious, and driven by greed disguised as charm. Yet in her presence, Damon felt powerful again. She made him believe he was still the man the world worshipped, not the husband tied down by responsibility, not the man with a pregnant wife waiting at home. Poor thing, Vanessa would laugh, swirling her wine glass in the soft glow of their secret penthouse. She's probably knitting baby clothes while you're saving the world. Her words were sugar-coated poison, and Damon drank every drop. He told himself he deserved this, that he was too young, too vibrant to be chained by late-night cravings and doctor visits. Each meeting with Vanessa deepened his blindness, She whispered more than affection. She whispered control. "You deserve better than a crying pregnant woman," she murmured once, her fingers tracing his jaw. And for the first time, Damon didn't argue. Meanwhile, Elena waited at home, her dinner growing cold beside the flickering candlelight. When he finally returned near midnight, his collar carried the faint smear of lipstick, bold, red, and mocking. She noticed. Of course she did, but she didn't confront him. She simply turned away, her hand resting over her stomach as if shielding her child from the truth. Her silence became her defense, her only way to keep her dignity intact. Yet, in that silence, something inside her began to break. What she didn't know was that silence, too, could bleed, quietly, painfully, and long before the heart gives up. The night was meant to be elegant, another polished appearance for the tabloids, another illusion of a perfect marriage. The rain outside glistened against the black cars that lined the red carpet, reflecting the shimmer of camera flashes. Elena stepped out in a flowing silver gown, her hand resting gently on her rounded belly. Despite her exhaustion, she looked ethereal, the kind of beauty that didn't need diamonds to shine. Damon stood beside her, smile rehearsed, charm intact. To the world, they looked unbreakable. Inside, Elena's heart prayed this night might remind him of what they once were. The laughter, the promises, the love. But as the orchestra played and champagne flowed, the whispers began. Heads turned, murmurs rippled through the ballroom. Elena followed their gaze and froze. Across the marble floor, Vanessa stood in a daring black dress, draped in Damon's tailored coat. The coat she had bought him for their anniversary. Cameras clicked. The scandal captured forever. Elena's breath hitched. Her vision blurred. Still, she smiled faintly, excused herself, and whispered, "I need some air." Damon saw her leave, but when Vanessa reached for his arm, he stayed. Outside, the rain met her tears. She walked toward the car, one hand clutching her stomach as pain twisted inside her. By the time she reached the mansion, her dress was soaked, her steps faltering. She pushed open the heavy doors, the marble gleaming beneath her trembling feet, and then agony. She collapsed, a sharp cry echoing through the empty halls. Blood followed her touch, warm against the cold floor. "Damon," she whispered, her voice breaking. But Damon never turned back. And as the rain beat harder against the windows, the house echoed with the sound of something fragile. Love, dying quietly on the floor. The world came back to Elena in fragments. The faint beeping of machines, the sterile scent of disinfectant, the cold touch of metal against her wrist. Her eyes fluttered open to a ceiling she didn't recognize, and for a moment, she couldn't remember why she was there. Then the pain returned. Deep, hollow, merciless. The doctor stood at her bedside, voice soft but distant, as if he'd said these words too many times before. "Mrs. Cole," he murmured, eyes heavy with pity, "we did everything we could." That single sentence cut deeper than any wound. She didn't need him to finish. Her hands moved instinctively to her stomach. It was flatter now, empty. The life that once fluttered beneath her heart was gone. Tears came soundlessly, her body too weak for sobs. She turned her face to the side, staring at the white wall where sunlight crept in, mocking her with its brightness. The chair beside her bed was empty. No flowers, no calls. No Damon. When the door opened, hope flickered. Maybe finally it was him. But it was only a nurse holding a brown envelope. "These were delivered by Mr. Cole's assistant," she said gently. Elena's trembling fingers broke the seal. Inside, divorce papers. Her breath hitched. Her name printed beside cold legal phrases, next to the man who had sworn to protect her. Her vision blurred as she tried to read, but the meaning was clear. He wanted out. Her hands could barely hold the pen. Yet she signed, because her heart already had. When the nurse left, Elena stared at the ceiling, whispering to the emptiness inside her. "It's over, isn't it?" The silence didn't answer, but it didn't have to. It already had, Charles. Moore arrived at the hospital with the pace of a man who had always believed numbers could fix anything. But numbers could not fix the sight of his daughter, pale beneath the clinical lights. The moment he stepped into the room and saw Elena's face, the polished CEO vanished. He was only a father, breath caught, hands trembling, the world narrowing to the fragile woman before him. He read the report with a surgeon's focus, but each line lacerated him in a way spreadsheets never had. The divorce papers crinkled in his hands like a betrayal written in legal ink. Anger rose volcanic, not the bluster of a spoiled man, but the cold, methodical fury of someone who knew how to dismantle empires one hinge at a time. "Who did this?" he demanded, voice low and dangerous. Elena could not answer. She only closed her eyes as if the motion could stitch up what had been torn. Charles did not leave. He stayed until the hospital lights blurred into a halo, and the night shift whispered his name in corridors like a myth. That night, in the privacy of his study, he summoned the advisors and spoke in a calm that masked a storm. He did not shout. He drew diagrams, traced corporate ties, and placed phone calls that would ripple through markets. "You wanted war, Damon Cole?" he said into the receiver, every syllable a verdict. "Then war is what you'll get." He would not be rash. He would be relentless, though. And in those hours, as the city slept unaware, a plan was born. Precise, devastating, inevitable. The city awoke to its usual rhythm. Trading bells. Headlines, morning coffee. But beneath that calm surface, Charles Moore had already set the clock ticking. He didn't shout, didn't warn, didn't announce. Revenge, he knew, was most effective when delivered in silence. At precisely 7 a.m., he made his first call. "Freeze all joint ventures with coal industries," he instructed his finance director. Effective immediately. Within minutes, the Moore conglomerate, Damon's largest corporate ally, withdrew from every project, every deal, every shared account. Like dominoes, other companies followed, too afraid to oppose the man who could collapse a market with one signature. By 9 a.m., Charles was on a private line with the banks. His tone never changed even when he ordered, "Audit every transaction under Damon Cole's name." The bankers hesitated only once before obeying. At noon, a confidential file appeared in the inbox of 3 major financial journalists, anonymous, untraceable. Inside, evidence of Damon's insider trading, forged reports, and hidden offshore accounts. The world had been waiting for a scandal, and Charles delivered it wrapped in truth. By 4 p.m., the whispers had spread like wildfire through glass towers and trading floors. Investors pulled out. Reporters camped outside Damon's headquarters. Stock values tumbled. The man who once ruled the boardrooms of New York was now the headline. Billionaire Damon Cole under investigation. Meanwhile, Vanessa lounged in her newly furnished mansion, sipping champagne on a balcony that glittered with illusion. She posted pictures of her diamond necklace, tagged with our new beginnings. She didn't know the foundation beneath her was already cracking. Every brick paid for by a man whose empire was seconds away from collapse. And somewhere across the city, Charles checked his watch, calm and cold. The 24-hour countdown had begun. By dawn, chaos had replaced calm. The glowing skyscraper that once bore Damon Cole's name now stood like a monument of panic. Computer screens flashed red across the trading floor, numbers dropping faster than the shouts could keep up. Coal Industries, 47%. The empire was bleeding value, and no one could stop the fall. Outside, a sea of journalists swarmed the iron gates, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Cole, are the allegations true? Did you manipulate the market?" Their questions tore through the morning air like gunfire. Inside, employees whispered in corners, their eyes darting away when Damon entered. Once they stood when he walked by. Now they couldn't even meet his gaze. Damon slammed open the glass doors of the boardroom, the echo sharp and desperate. "What the hell is happening?" he barked. His lawyer, pale, sweating, fumbled with papers. "Charles Moore has filed a federal lawsuit. Insider trading, fraud, contract violations. It's all over the news." The words hit harder than any blow. Damon's mind raced. Calls unanswered. Investors fleeing. Friends turning silent. His phone buzzed nonstop, but there were no solutions, only demands. He looked out the window and saw everything he had built, everything he had stolen, collapsing in real time. Vanessa burst in moments later, barefoot, mascara smeared. "Fix this," she screamed, grabbing his arm. "I can't lose this life, Damon. You promised me everything!" But for the first time, Damon didn't answer. The confidence, the arrogance, the charm, gone. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger. He had spent years building an empire on betrayal and pride. Now, with a single name, Charles Moore, it was all turning to dust, and Damon finally understood. This was justice with interest. The Moore estate rested far from the city's noise, surrounded by gardens where the breeze carried the scent of roses and rain-soaked earth. From the balcony of her room, Elena watched the sunrise spill gold across the horizon. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it only reminded her how time moved forward, even when hearts refused to. Her father had insisted she rest, but sleep had long abandoned her. The world she'd built, her marriage, her dreams, her motherhood, all gone within the same heartbeat. Yet, as she sat at her writing desk, there was no anger in her eyes. Only peace, the kind that comes when pain has burned itself to ashes. She took out a sheet of soft ivory paper and began to write. The pen trembled at first, but the words flowed like tears. "Damon, I don't hate you. I did for a while. But hate is just love that's been starved too long. You didn't just lose a wife or a child. You lost the only person who would have forgiven you. I hope one day you realize that forgiveness was a gift you'll never earn again." Her handwriting wavered near the end, ink smudged by the touch of her tears. She stared at the page for a long moment, then quietly folded it, leaving it unsigned. It didn't need a name. He would know. Behind her, Charles Moore stood in the doorway, silent. He didn't speak, didn't try to stop her. When she turned and met his eyes, he gave a small nod, proud of her strength, broken by her pain. As she sealed the envelope, Elena whispered, "This isn't goodbye to him, Father. It's goodbye to who I used to be." And for the first time, she truly meant it. Vanessa Hart had always loved the spotlight. The flash of cameras, the compliments wrapped in envy, the glittering parties where her laughter echoed louder than her conscience. It was her kingdom. But kingdoms built on borrowed crowns don't last long. Within days, her world began to shrink. The glossy magazines that once praised her style now replaced her with newer faces. The invitations stopped. Her phone, once overflowing with messages, went silent. The same friends who cheered her rise now whispered behind her back, "She backed the wrong billionaire." The first sign of real collapse came when the luxury car company arrived at her gates. "Repossession order, Ms. Hart," the man said flatly, holding a clipboard. By the next morning, the wardrobe she flaunted on social media had disappeared too. Designer bags, gowns, jewels, all claimed by creditors. Panicked, she called Damon again and again. "You promised me," she shouted into the phone. "You said this was our life." But the line always ended with silence, or the hollow tone of disconnection. Damon was too busy trying to breathe life into his dying empire to save her vanity. The mansion she once boasted about, our love palace, she'd called it, was soon seized. As movers carried out the furniture, she stood barefoot on the marble floor, clutching her phone. For once, no camera captured her tears. Before walking out for the last time, she opened her social media one final time and posted a single photo of the empty hallway. The caption read, "Should have stayed the mistress, not the queen." The post went viral within hours, not for its glamour, but as the perfect eulogy for a fallen illusion. Vanessa Hart had always believed she was untouchable, the woman who could turn desire into power, lies into luxury. For a while, it worked. Her name shimmered in headlines. Her designer bags lined entire closets, and her laughter echoed through mansion halls that didn't belong to her. She had traded morals for marble floors and believed it was worth it, but power borrowed from another's empire always comes with an expiration date. The first blow came quietly. The bank froze her accounts. Her stylist stopped answering her calls. The gossip columns that once adored her started deleting her photos, replacing her face with new obsessions. Then came the knock on the door. 2 men in black suits, calm and efficient. "Repossession notice," one said. holding up a paper as they stepped inside. Her bags, her cars, her jewelry, gone in hours. Vanessa tried to reach Damon, her lifeline to luxury. "You promised me we'd never fall," she screamed into the phone. But on the other end there was only silence, static, and then nothing. Damon was drowning in his own downfall, too desperate to save himself, let alone her, when the mansion was seized. Vanessa stood in the middle of the empty living room, heels clicking against marble stripped of meaning. For the first time there were no cameras, no applause, only the echo of her own mistakes. Before walking out, she took one last picture, herself, reflected in a shattered mirror, and posted it with the caption, "Should have stayed the mistress, not the queen. It was her final performance. Tragic, poetic, and painfully honest." The world watched, and for once, she didn't smile. The boardroom, once Damon Cole's throne, now felt like a courtroom. Every polished surface reflecting the ruin he'd brought upon himself. The city skyline loomed behind the glass wall, cold and indifferent, as if watching justice unfold. The long mahogany table was surrounded by men and women who used to hang on his every word. Now they sat in tense silence, eyes avoiding his. Damon stormed in, his tie loosened, his pride barely intact. "You think this will stop me?" he barked, slamming his palm on the table. "I built this company. None of you would have a seat here without me." At the far end sat Charles Moore, composed as ever, papers neatly stacked before him. His calmness was more terrifying than Damon's fury. "You built it on lies," Charles said evenly, "and on the blood of the woman you swore to protect." Damon's voice cracked, anger masking guilt. "You ruined me," he shouted. Charles's eyes were steel. "No, Mr. Cole," he said quietly, each word precise as a blade. "You ruined my daughter." The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. A legal representative stood and began reading from a document. Effective immediately, Damon Cole is hereby removed as CEO of Cole Industries. All holdings and controlling shares have been transferred to Moore Holdings, under the terms of acquisition. Damon's pen, the one that had once signed billion-dollar deals, now scratched a single signature of surrender. His empire, his pride, his identity, gone in ink. As the guards escorted him out, cameras flashed from the hallway. Reporters shouted questions, but he couldn't hear them anymore. Within 24 hours, the billionaire who thought himself untouchable was nothing, stripped of fortune, fame, and forgiveness. The rain hadn't stopped all week. Damon stood outside the tall iron gates of the Moore estate, drenched and shivering, clutching a small bouquet of lilies, the kind Elena used to love. His reflection in the puddles looked like a stranger, hollow eyes, unshaven, a man who had once owned the world but lost the only part of it that mattered. Through the fogged glass of her window, he saw her. Elena. She was walking slowly through the garden, wrapped in a soft shawl, her father steady beside her. The same garden where she once dreamed aloud of their child learning to walk. Now, the flowers bloomed quietly around a grief she carried with grace. Damon pressed his hand to the gate. His lips trembled. "Elena," he whispered, voice breaking, but the rain drowned it. A guard noticed him and approached. "You're not allowed here, Mr. Cole," he said firmly. Damon nodded weakly. There was no fight left in him. As the guard escorted him away, he turned one last time. Through the mist, he saw Elena pause, her hand brushing a white rose. For a fleeting second, he thought she felt him near. But she didn't turn. The distance between them wasn't just measured in steps. It was built from every night he didn't come home, every tear he never saw, every heartbeat she lost alone. The gates closed behind him with a heavy clang, sealing a chapter he could never rewrite. He walked away under the storm, realizing that some losses, no matter how much it rains, can never be washed clean. Months had passed. Quiet, healing months filled with therapy sessions, business meetings, and moments of fragile peace. Elena Moore had rebuilt herself piece by piece, not into the woman she once was, but into someone stronger, someone unbreakable. Tonight, She stood beneath the golden lights of the same charity gala where her world had once shattered. The hall that had echoed with whispers and betrayal now resonated with applause. For her. The silver gown she wore shimmered not with pain, but with power. Charles Moore stepped onto the stage, his voice steady, his pride unhidden. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "allow me to introduce the new vice president of Moore Holdings, my daughter, Elena Moore." The crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. Within minutes, headlines blazed across every screen. From betrayal to power, Elena Moore's triumphant return. Elena smiled gracefully, her posture regal yet calm. There was no trace of the fragile woman who once begged for love. Now, she stood as her own salvation, proof that even in ruin, a woman could rise. From the edge of the crowd, Damon watched silently. Gone was the billionaire who commanded rooms. In his place stood a man stripped of arrogance, haunted by memory. His eyes found her, the same eyes that once looked at her with love, now filled with regret. For a brief moment, time paused. Their gazes met. Elena's lips curved into a soft smile, not of affection, but of forgiveness and finality. A smile that said, "You no longer have the power to hurt me." Damon lowered his head as the applause thundered again. Elena turned away, stepping toward the spotlight, no longer someone's wife or tragedy. She was her own empire now,